And, you know, for my being just one person, having all those problems, it was huge. And those were the kinds of things that were being done to discredit me and, you know, used to say that I was crazy. You know, nobody else has those kinds of problems. And so it was, you must be dialing the wrong number, you must be psychotic, and you don't even know what numbers you're dialing, was the kind of thing that, you know, was being played off. And my fax machines, that were connected to my printer, I had 3 of them consecutively being fried. It was 3 printers in a row that were brand new, and then after they fried 3 of my printers, the next thing that they basically blew up was my desktop computer that I'd had since 1997. And that happened in East Wenatchee. And I mean, I remember that when that happened to my computer, I found an 800 number for Knights of Columbus in Ohio, and I was talking to them because I was trying to get some information. I was trying to piece together people who were connected to people to find out why some of these things were happening, and because people kept bringing up Mary all the time, you know, how that was attached to religious hate crimes against me, you know, because it seemed like it was animosity about that more than anything. And I remember while I was on the phone with that Knights of Columbus headquarters in Ohio, that's when the aerospace defense industry decided to blow up my computer, my desktop computer. It was plugged into the wall. The cord started to get extremely hot. It was like something on the other side of the wall, or from a great distance, was being supercharged or tapped into. And then all of a sudden, the back of the box blew up while I was still on the phone with this Knights of Columbus headquarters group. And when I say blew up, I mean, well, I started to smell this horrible smell of burning. And I reached over and I unplugged it really fast. And then I remember that when I unplugged my computer from the wall, I remember that the man on the other line, stopped talking. And I thought that was kind of weird. I was like, how does he know that I just unplugged my computer? I'm like, I didn't say to him, I smell something burning, I have to unplug something. I just did it while I was talking to him, and then all of a sudden he just halted what he was doing, stopped. And then I got off the phone, and when I looked at the back of the box, I had to take some screwdriver and then screw the back of it. There was ink from some part of the box that basically splattered. It really did explode. It splattered all across the panel that goes against all the equipment that's inside. The other thing that happened was, in addition to all this telephonic harassment and really bizarre things that were happening with my telephone services, I, you know, had my printers and equipment being blown up and fried. So, I mean, that was like vandalism, but how am I supposed to prove somebody in charge of United States aerospace defense industry is vandalizing all my belongings? And the other thing that was happening, in addition to those things, is, as I've already described, like literal torture that caused excruciating pain to me and my son, and a whole bunch of different things were being done, which I will describe in more detail in a little bit. And so for all of these things to be happening, the torture, the blowing up of my printer kind of thing, that started happening in 2004. Having my batteries in my car drained of energy while I was driving, that happened in 2003. So technology was being used not just to trigger migraines conveniently for parties, but it was used to create really dangerous situations with my driving, and it was military or police. I don't really think that, I can't imagine that police were able to do that or would be constantly around me trying out new gadgets, to do that. It seems to me a little bit more something that would happen from a military or aerospace industry kind of department. So in 2003, that was happening to my vehicles. In 2004, that was still happening to my vehicles, and then my printers were being blown up. Brand new printers. Nothing wrong with them. After that was being done, which disrupted and interfered with my lawsuits, then it was being falsely arrested and a whole bunch of things that were not looking like technology, but it was basically misuse of the justice system and persons that worked in the justice system to cause stress and chaos in my life by taking my car from me, claiming that I had a suspended license when I didn't, and preventing me from driving to college. Basically, I was blocked from continuing to go to college at that point, and making a lot of other false accusations using the legal system. So the legal system, persons within the legal system, and persons within the aerospace defense and military system, they were working together at the same time. And at that same time, there were people who had raped me, and who didn't want me to succeed in my lawsuits. And so they targeted me, and they didn't want anyone to believe me, so they were also calling me they didn't want people to believe anything I said. So they were calling me paranoid schizophrenic. And I was able to shrug that off as long as I was in college. But when they blocked me from college, college or work, when they blocked me from college, then that's when I was, pregnant with my son. And right after my son was born, they really laid into me and started making a bunch of false claims. And then tortured me, and then brought up this whole, that, I just had my son, so I was now having a nervous breakdown. And no, that was not what was happening at all. And so when the judge hung up on me and was part of that problem with the justice system, and they took my son, then he said I had to have a psychological evaluation. I knew that I would be able, I hadn't been in the public eye very much. Well, no, actually I had, because I'd gone out all the time. But it wasn't like I was, I didn't know people who were doctors, and personally, I wasn't friends with people who were, I hadn't grown up in that town. That town, it's like everybody knows everybody. And then a few people kind of moved into the area, and they sort of bribe everybody who already knew everybody. I wasn't part of that circle. So when I was on the East Coast, I asked to be able to have that psychological evaluation done there, and I knew that I could be cleared instantly. But instead, CPS in Washington, D.C., and CPS in Washington made it impossible for me to get that done because they refused to arrange the psych eval that they were supposed to coordinate. That wouldn't have taken that long for them to coordinate. And that months and months went by, and the entire time I was working very hard at that, trying to get it done, going repeatedly to the CPS offices in Washington, D.C., making phone calls. And right about the time that I was trying to get that taken care of, that's when I was pregnant with my the second time, and that's about the time that they started up the same telephonic harassment and redirecting my phone calls stuff while I was in Virginia. So then it was happening in Virginia for a brief time, and that was about the same time that I was fired from the Post Pub. And I had this feeling that people were trying to make it look like right then and there, like I was crazy again. I think that they were hoping that they could do a bunch of telephonic harassment and then force me back to Washington State and continue this whole idea of, well, even if I got out from under it for several months, I must really be nuts again. And you know, basically, if I'd gone to Washington State and had and not miscarried and had those children, I'm sure the state was already preparing to take those children away as well. I mean, if I had stayed on the East Coast, I don't think they would have taken the kids had they been born. But they definitely would have taken those kids away from me. And they were setting that up. They were already at 3 months of gestation of these children in my womb. They were already setting that up to make me look like I was crazy again, even in Washington, D.C., so that when I said there were a few things happening, or a few problems in Washington, D.C., they could say, oh yeah, so it's happening everywhere she goes. She's crazy. And, you know, I was pregnant, so they probably give me prenatal care. And then the minute the kids were born, she has a severe mental illness and is a danger to these children. Take the kids and, oh, great, the United States gets more guinea pigs. And so, I will be back in just a moment. Okay, so the other thing... Anyway, I was just describing some of the motives for why people wanted to say I was use the worst possible claims of mental illness against me that they could. The other reason I believe is because, you know, I'd reported the FBI, and there were different federal employees that had raped me, or that I had reported, and some of them wanted revenge. And some of them just didn't want anyone to believe me. So, using a claim of paranoid schizophrenic worked out very well for basically excusing anything and everything that was ever done to me. So it was really important that I had this psych eval. I mean, it really actually was not even necessary. It was not necessary because this country never should have tortured me and my son to begin with. And they never should have kidnapped my son and chased us out from Canada or colluded with Canada. I should have never been asked to give a psych eval for this country, because unless I had a real problem, it was none of their business. And they basically used, another thing they did is just use it as an invasion of my privacy. They wanted something to smear me with, and they wanted more access to my medical records.